Harvey Specter never should have hired Mike Ross. A kid with no law degree, running from a drug deal gone wrong, hiding in a hotel room during a job interview he wasn't even supposed to be at. On paper, hiring him should have ended Harvey's career the same day it started, and yet that single reckless decision built the most talked about partnership in the entire show. Everyone remembers that moment. Almost nobody asks the real question hiding underneath it: who actually made Harvey capable of pulling that off in the first place? Because Harvey didn't learn to bluff a courtroom, read a room, or stare down a name partner twice his age by accident. Someone built that version of him years before Mike Ross ever walked through the door. That someone was Jessica Pearson. And by the end of this video, you're going to know exactly what she built in him, what he never fully learned from her, and why the answer to who was the better mentor is not the answer most fans of the show would give you if you asked them right now. So here's the real question underneath the title: Harvey Specter versus Jessica Pearson. Who was the better mentor? Not who's more likable, not who gets more screen time or more of the killer one-liners. The better mentor, the one who actually built something that lasted. Stick with this video to the end, because I'm going to plant something right here at the start, a loose thread. And I promise you it gets tied off completely by the final minute, the exact moment where Harvey's entire style, everything that makes him Harvey, either does or doesn't hold up without Jessica standing behind him. Keep that question in the back of your mind. What happens to Harvey the moment Jessica isn't there to catch him? Let's start where the show starts, with how each of them actually brings someone into the fold. Harvey Specter recruits from the gut. Watch the way he looks at Mike Ross for the first time, not as a liability, which is what any rational senior partner would see, but as a mirror, a rougher, unfinished version of himself. Harvey sees a kid who bluffed his way into a room he had no legal right to be in, and something in Harvey recognizes that instantly, because that's basically the emotional profile Harvey runs on. From day one, Mike isn't treated like an employee. He's treated like a little brother who needs protecting, which sounds sweet, until you realize what protecting someone constantly actually costs both people involved. Every time Mike's secret is about to surface, and it surfaces constantly across the show, that's basically the entire premise. Harvey is the one absorbing the risk. He lies to partners. He manipulates situations. He puts his own name, his own bar license, his own reputation directly in the path of Mike's mistakes over and over, season after season. If you're watching that as a viewer, it plays as loyalty, and it is loyalty. But look at what it does to Mike over time. Mike gets sharper at the actual work. He's a genuinely brilliant associate, but he never has to develop the one skill that matters most in that firm, which is surviving exposure without someone standing between him and the fallout. Every single time Harvey steps in, Mike learns the job a little better and learns dependency a little better. At the exact same time, in the exact same motion. Now rewind further, back before Mike Ross was even a name in the show, to how Jessica built Harvey. Jessica did not mentor Harvey the way Harvey mentors Mike. When Harvey was younger, brasher, still figuring out exactly how far his mouth could carry him, Jessica did not step in every time he made an arrogant or reckless call. She let him make the call. She let the political consequences land on him directly, in real time, while she watched from exactly close enough to see it happen and exactly far enough away to not soften it. That's not coldness. That's a completely different theory of what building someone actually means. Jessica understood something early, that Harvey took years to fully absorb himself, that shielding someone from the consequence of their mistake doesn't protect them. It just delays the mistake to a much worse moment later, usually when the stakes are higher and nobody's around to catch it. So right there, in the very foundation of how these two operate, you already have the entire thesis of this video in miniature. Harvey survives crises using instinct in the moment, because that's the muscle Jessica forced him to build early. Improvising under pressure with no safety net, Jessica builds positions so strong that most crises never make it to her desk at all, because she spent years constructing the structure underneath her instead of relying on reflexes alone. Harvey teaches you how to win the fight you're already in. Jessica teaches you how to make sure the fight never gets close enough to start. Now let's talk about the thing Harvey is most famous for across the entire run of the show: winning without ever setting foot in a courtroom. It's genuinely one of the most compelling parts of his character. Intimidation, theatrical bluffing, psychological pressure applied at exactly the right second to make the other side fold before the actual legal argument even matters. It's flashy, it's quotable, it's the reason clips of Harvey circulate everywhere online, completely detached from the actual plot of any episode. But here's what almost never gets said out loud when people praise that style. A bluff only works because of what's sitting underneath it, invisible, unglamorous, and completely necessary. Nobody films the part where Harvey and his team pulled all-nighters mapping out precedent before he strolled into that room looking like he hadn't broken a sweat. Jessica is the reason that groundwork exists at all in Harvey's habits. She never let him get away with leaning purely on charm or posture when he was coming up under her. Before he was allowed to make a move in a real negotiation, she demanded the research be exhaustive, the structure airtight, every possible counter-argument mapped out in advance. When Harvey later teaches Mike his own version of confidence, he teaches the performance. Project certainty, don't blink, make the opponent play you instead of the case. That's a real skill, and it works, right up until Harvey runs into someone who can actually verify whether the certainty behind his bluff is real or not. Jessica taught him painfully over years that real confidence was never supposed to be the performance in the first place. It's just what preparation looks like from the outside once it's complete. This distinction becomes the difference between Harvey looking untouchable and Harvey actually being untouchable, and the show makes that gap explicit more than once. Every time one of Harvey's bluffs meets someone who refuses to be intimidated and instead calls for the paperwork. In those moments, it's never the swagger that saves him. It's whatever Jessica installed in him years before the cameras ever found him mid-bluff. Now think about how each of them physically controls a room, because the show is almost obsessive about showing you this contrast if you're paying attention. Harvey walks in loud, rapid-fire lines, aggressive framing, and almost theatrical energy designed to knock the other side off balance before they've had time to think clearly. It's the most quotable version of the character, and it's genuinely fun to watch. But notice what it teaches anyone learning from him. You start to associate volume with winning. You start to believe the person who fills the room with the most energy is automatically the one who leaves it in control. Jessica does the opposite, and it's more unsettling to everyone across the table because of it. When Jessica walks into a room, people go quiet before she said a single word, because everyone in that firm already knows exactly what her silence has cost people before. She lets opponents talk themselves into exhaustion. She lets them expose their own leverage points without her spending a single word pulling it out of them. Then, once they fully revealed their hand, she delivers one sentence and it's over. Where Harvey uses noise to provoke a reaction he can then exploit, Jessica uses silence to read the entire board before she moves a single piece on it. It's the difference between winning an argument that's already started and making sure the argument never gets a fair chance to happen in the first place. Now let's get into the split that decides careers far beyond the walls of that fictional firm, being liked versus being respected. Harvey genuinely wants the people around him to see him as more than their boss. He wants Mike and Donna to see him as something closer to invincible, someone worth admiring, not just working for. And that desire complicates him constantly throughout the show. It's the exact reason he makes emotional decisions and then dresses them up afterward as strategy. It's why he protects people even when protecting them clearly isn't what's best for them long term. Jessica does not carry that same need, and it's not because she's incapable of caring about people. The show proves repeatedly that she does. It's because she keeps two completely separate ledgers: what people feel about her personally and what they owe her professionally. She is fully comfortable being resented by her own partners, even by the people she's directly mentoring, if that resentment is the price of keeping the firm intact. She never chases being liked. She demands respect instead, because she understands those are earned through completely different behaviors, and confusing the two is how firms and careers quietly collapse from the inside. This is where the show gives us one of its most underrated storylines: the internal power struggle for control of the firm itself. Watch how Jessica handles betrayal from inside her own ranks compared to how Harvey handles it. Harvey takes betrayal personally every time, because to Harvey, loyalty is emotional currency. Jessica treats betrayal as a data point about leverage and positioning, something to be countered strategically rather than mourned. That single difference in temperament is why Jessica survives internal coups that would have ended a more emotionally reactive leader. Which brings us to the tension between loyalty and ambition, because both of them wrestle with it constantly, just from opposite directions. Harvey treats loyalty as personal and absolute. Stand by your people, no matter the cost, even when the numbers say cut your losses. It's part of what makes him magnetic as a character, and it's genuinely part of what makes people follow him, but it also creates real blind spots across the series. Moments where his fierce personal loyalty to Mike, to Donna, to his own inner circle blinds him to threats building against the firm from the outside, and occasionally encourages the people under him to take risks they never should have taken because they've learned Harvey will absorb the consequences if it goes sideways. Jessica treats loyalty and ambition as fluid, strategic variables inside a much larger structure, not as fixed personal virtues owed to specific people. She understood something that took Harvey years and multiple hard lessons to accept. That bravado wins the argument happening today, but leverage decides the settlement everyone actually has to live with tomorrow. She never demanded blind emotional loyalty from anyone she trained. Instead, she aligned incentives so that what was good for the associate and what was good for the firm pointed in the same direction, which made loyalty a structural fact instead of an emotional demand. And here's where the show gives us the clearest proof of this philosophy in action. When Harvey eventually maneuvers against Jessica himself, later in the series, during the fight for control of the firm, Jessica does not respond with hurt feelings or a sense of personal betrayal. She countermaneuvers immediately, calmly, and strategically, and in doing so, teaches Harvey one of the defining lessons of his entire career, whether he wanted the lesson or not. Ambition without leverage behind it is just insubordination wearing a nicer suit. That confrontation is, arguably, the single most important lesson Jessica ever gives him, because it's the one time he tries to beat her at her own game and discovers exactly how much further ahead of him she still is. Now let's talk about the split between competence and charm, because it's the one that decides who actually survives long-term in that world versus who just looks good in the short term. Harvey leans heavily on personal aura, quick wit, force of personality, the kind of charisma that makes people want to say yes to him even when the actual terms don't fully favor them. He teaches Mike his signature approach: make the opponent play the person instead of the case, get them reacting emotionally instead of thinking clearly. It's a genuinely potent weapon in that world, and it works constantly throughout the show, right up until it runs into somebody who simply refuses to play along. Jessica enforces something far less flashy and far more permanent: total, unassailable competence. She understands that charm is fickle, completely dependent on the room, the day, the opponent, and it fails you exactly when the stakes are highest and you can least afford it. Technical mastery doesn't have that weakness. Procedural knowledge doesn't care whether the other side happens to like you. Flawless execution works the same whether you're liked or hated in that room. When Harvey tries to lean on pure charisma to skip past protocol, Jessica grounds him hard, over and over, by proving that structural competence is the only currency of power in that firm that never depreciates. Which brings us to the deepest split of all, the one that finally answers the question I planted at the very beginning of this video. What happens to Harvey the moment Jessica isn't there to catch him? Because that moment actually happens in the show. Jessica eventually steps back from the firm entirely, leaves for Chicago, and Harvey is left standing in the wreckage of a firm under attack without the one person who spent years building the discipline underneath his instincts. And here's the part we're sitting with. Harvey doesn't collapse, he holds. He becomes, over time, something closer to what Jessica always was. Someone the firm can actually be built around instead of someone who just wins the fight in front of him. That's not an accident, and it's not just Harvey finally growing up on his own. That's the proof of what Jessica actually built in him. All those years earlier when she refused to save him from every arrogant mistake and made him pay full tuition for his own recklessness instead. Compare that to Mike. Mike, who spent his entire time at the firm wrapped in Harvey's protection, constantly shielded from the consequences of his own secret, eventually leaves the world of corporate law altogether. Not because he wasn't talented, he clearly was, but because the foundation under his confidence was always partially borrowed. Harvey gave him a safety net that worked brilliantly, right up until the environment changed enough that the net itself became the problem. That's the real answer to the question at the center of this video. Harvey Specter was an exceptional tactical coach, genuinely one of the best you'll find in that world if what you need is someone to win the fight directly in front of you right now with the tools you already have. But Jessica Pearson was the better mentor because she was never optimizing for the fight in front of her at all. She was building for what happens decades later, long after that specific fight is forgotten, when the person she trained has to stand completely on their own. Harvey teaches you how to win as an individual. Jessica teaches you how to build something that survives without you personally winning every single time. And here's the loose thread finally pulled tight. The version of Harvey who holds the firm together after Jessica leaves. Confident under real pressure, structurally prepared instead of just theatrically bold. Capable of being resented without collapsing. That's not the Harvey who recruited Mike Ross in a hotel room. That's the Harvey Jessica spent years quietly constructing, long before the show even started, by refusing to be the mentor who caught him every single time he fell. So if you take one thing from this video, take this. The mentors who make you feel the safest in the moment are rarely the ones who make you the strongest over time. If someone in your life is currently protecting you from every consequence, cushioning every fall before it lands, ask yourself honestly whether you're actually improving or just getting more comfortable relying on the cushion. And if you're the one in a position to mentor someone else, at work, at home, anywhere people are learning something from watching how you operate, ask yourself which one you've actually been. The one who fights the battle for them, or the one willing to be resented for a while so they can eventually fight it themselves. That's the whole difference between Harvey Specter and Jessica Pearson. And it's the whole difference between a great tactician and a great mentor. One wins the room today. The other builds someone who never needs the room.